the Yes Bank conundrum continues to confuse investors and market watchers alike. So there was a crucial board meet today that was to consider various options of fund infusion that are crucial at this point for the bank's balance sheet and, let's be honest, survival. But if you were waiting for the fog to lift after the board meet today, you may just have to wait a little longer. While the board has said it's willing to consider an infusion of $500 million from Cytax Holdings, it will continue to evaluate the $1.2 billion being offered by mystery investor Canadian-Indian Irwin Singh Bright. In fact, this $1.2 billion makes up 60% of the funds that Yes Bank is currently trying to raise. So, should investors now say yes to Yes Bank or continue to say no? To speak more on this, I'm joined now by Gurmeet Chadha, co-founder and CEO of Complete Circle Consultants Private Limited. Mr. Chadha, thank you for joining us on this show. And I just want to understand very simply, can you make out what's going on in Yes Bank? And what were you expecting from the meeting today?
I think it's only adding to the confusion, Tamanna. If you see, they first announced in the beginning November, post their numbers of a $1.2 billion binding deal from a US-based investors. They in fact also gave the deadline, which later got extended to 31st December. As per that, the average price of last 2 weeks was to be taken as a cutoff. I think there probably would have been some change of mind either by the board or by the regulatory intervention because if you see the RBI rules, one, they are technical, and second is even for an exception you have to pass through the fit and proper test. So on technicals, anything above 5% stake needs an RBI approval. If you are a non-banking, non-financial institution, it is capped at 10%. And if you are a financial institution, it's capped at 15%. So this 1.2 billion actually, if you see the current market cap, which is hardly 13,000 crores, it really surpasses that. Also, if you go to the balance sheet, while fundraising, you pointed out, is necessary for survival. If you go to the balance sheet, it's still, there is a lot of cloud over it. If you see the exposure to sensitive sectors or stress sectors, that's 20% of the balance sheet. Yeah, if you come to BB and below, which is non-investment grade, that's 14% of the balance sheet, totaling to some 31,000 crores. So even if they get the capital, the future profitability is contingent upon whether there will be incremental NPS, because there is some concentration with few names being added in Q2, which is your CCD and CG Power. And second, they will have to shrink the balance sheet initially, right? So I don't think so there is future profitability at site. And the speculative trades like these that should best be avoided by the retail investors.
Okay, no, absolutely. Right now we don't know what's happening in Yes Bank, but you're reading from what we've heard from the meeting. So we do know there's an offer of $500 million from Cytax Holding. Why have they not accepted then at this point? What do you make of two decisions? One is that we're considering $500 million and we will evaluate what comes from Mr. Bright, and a bit more on Mr. Bright and the mystery surrounding him in a bit. But it was widely expected that they would reject the $1.2 billion that this Canadian-Indian investor was putting in. They haven't done that either. They haven't rejected, they haven't accepted, they've said we're evaluating. What is the strategy you read?
I think it reflects poorly also on the the due diligence of the board. Without mincing words, this flip-flop will only harm the prospects, and the fact that they are favorably considering, which means the closure is still some time away, you are still at an evaluation stage. And also the board release did not mention anything about the marquee investors, including Mr. Jhunjhunwala, a couple of family offices, which included Aditya Birla family office. So I think there was complete silence over there as well. So I think timely capital raising is important. And mind you, financial institutions work on trust. So the credibility of who is backing the firm, a stronger hand would matter more than actually the quantum of capital, which obviously is needed, with the data I pointed out. Secondly, in my ground level checks, speaking to visiting branches, speaking to various colleagues, ex-colleagues, I think there's a slight pressure even on the liability side. While their liquidity coverage ratio is still 125% and their deposit book still stands at about 2.1 trillion, but there is some pressure coming on the liability side as well. So if you're shrinking balance sheet with advances slowing down, if the liability side also sees a bit of a run, then there will be more issues to grapple with. And add that with the ratings downgrade we are seeing by various rating agencies.
Yeah. So now let me add to the mix the sort of X factor in the entire Yes Bank saga, which is the current knight in shining armor, Mr. Bright. There was a very detailed piece out today in the media about his colorful background, and including the fact that he lives in a 3-star motel, there may be a show made about him, his ups and downs, etc. Is that spooking investors? Because the guy who could infuse 60% of the cash this bank needs, and I'm speaking very simply here, no one's sure if he's serious, and that perhaps is the biggest pain point.
Absolutely, and look at the share price even before the board meeting got concluded. The stock tanked 10% today. I mean, obviously the background raises a lot of eyebrows. There are a dozen plus lawsuits which are against him, including couple of bankruptcies. If you see his organization and constitution of the entity, it's basically 5 trusts which are in the name of children. He doesn't have a a headquarter or a there is no investment banker attached to him. The partner to Mr. Bright, which is SPGP Holdings, while they claim to have furnished a lot of assets, the company which they specifically talk about, which is Black Pearl Investments, I mean that's only capitalized as per them at about $200 million, and their business interest includes everything. It ranges from making retirement villages in Philippines and Thailand to having the nitrogen preserved teas in Sri Lanka. So there's a lot of there's a lot of questions which are raised and answered when you do a background check, which I think would be a very, very big factor when RBI considers and evaluates the. And also while Mr. Gill pointed out that the voting, he is not seeking voting rights, and that will be capped because the only interest is financial. I don't think so RBI would easily give a green signal on this.
This is the toughest question, Mr. Chadha. If you were Ravneet Gill, what would you do now? He's perhaps a man with one of the most difficult jobs right now. What would you do in his place right now?
Absolutely. I think as I said, financial institutions run on trust. They carry fiduciary responsibilities. My thing would be instead of flip-flopping on this, only issue statements when you have definite agreements in place and the capital raising is just around the corner. When you're more on the execution stage, I think the earlier way of raising capital was better when you had mutual funds and institutional investors coming in, even with smaller amounts. While I agree that the stress is large and a large quantum of capital is needed, but even if he goes incrementally with right set of institutions, right set of family offices, I think that will calm the street more than the actual quantum of capital. And they are just barely above the threshold of core equity being above 8%. But I still think that it's a franchise which if capital flows in incrementally can still survive. So I think better to go with institutional investors, go with better names, smaller quantum, incremental capital raising rather than being fixated about a large amount and with a particular set of investors.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Chadha, for speaking to us today, and hopefully all of you watching know what to do next and are tracking the Yes Bank story as closely as we are. Of course, if you want to know how the stock is reacting, you need to tune back right here tomorrow morning. Okay.